With some boundaries. Hello, I'm Quentin, Idjit Reads and Rambles, and I'm coming at you with a sort of Whateverday Reads type of video. I just want to talk about some stuff that I've been reading as of late because I figured I'd just drop by and say something, yeah, so the books I'm going to be talking about in this video are The Hour of the Star by Clarice Lispector. I'm going to try to not talk about that one as much as I can. Louis Armand's Breakfast at Midnight, The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu, and the Pawn of the Hand stories of Yasunari Kawabata. Sorry, I got no notes or anything. I'm just gonna, rattle them off. So what do we got here? Well, first I want to talk about Louis Armand's Breakfast at Midnight because I read this and I enjoyed it, but I had a I had a video that I thought was just truly not good stuff, so I deleted it. And I don't want to let this book go unacknowledged on my channel because this thing was really interesting. I didn't really know what Armand was trying to do thematically here. I mean, in terms of like the greater purpose of the character stories, but I did really enjoy the character stories. This is a piece of transgressive noir fiction. It is a truly vile book at times. We have our main character who is trying to come to terms with the death of a woman. A woman washes ashore. She washes ashore, probably a suicide, and it might be someone he knew, and he's trying to come to terms with what happened with that woman. He has a friend called Blake, and Blake is an interesting guy. I don't know if the William Blake is the sort of person. Blake has all types of philosophies about life and how, God is a sort of machine, and specifically a sex machine. That's where a lot of this comes from. And you'll see what I'm talking about when I also add that Blake is a photographer who photographs corpses. Yeah, it's kind of vile, but the style of this book is really interesting. It is a sort of stream of consciousness, right? The really interesting hallucinatory stream of consciousness writing here. I'll read you a little bit out of it. This is one paragraph. I stare at the photograph in the dying man's passport until it becomes as familiar as a face in the mirror, united by accident, by chance, providence, destiny. I say his name to myself for hundreds of hours on end, learning to become it, divining its inner life. I wait for him to die. I wait deliberately. This, I whisper to myself, is salvation. A gift horse. A second life. Right? That passage is really interesting to me, as if he can become someone else by looking at their picture. But yeah, the style of this thing is really engaging. I thought it's a really cool book. And for as messed up as this book can be, because this is a truly trucked up book, man. Do not get this if you're not down with transgressive literature, or if you are down with transgressive literature but you're not down with experimental stuff, I would say don't get this as well, because the style is quite experimental. Everything is linked by the Ace of Spades, which is a significant typographical thing in the book. It's very significant. What it represents is key, and all of these little moments are both linked by and separated by this Ace of Spades. It's really cool. Armand knows what the hell he's doing on a stylistic level. Later in the book, it's really interesting how we get some super hallucinatory scenes. We are showed a card with the Ace of Spades, and our perspective goes into the card to another world on the other side of it. It's really cool. Very easy to imagine despite all of these hallucinatory, surreal depictions of everything. Occasionally the style will shift to one of poetry. There'll be line breaks inserted, and we'll get a poem. It's really cool. And for as messed up as this book was, I found the note that it ended on awesome. It was such a beautiful ending, as if they've kind of weathered the storm, and now they're just thinking about what's next, and it's just ruins in front of them. It's not ruins in front of them at the end of the book, but that's kind of the situation they're in their life. But anyways, I say if you're down with transgressive literature and experimental fiction, check it out. If you're not down with one of those, don't check it out. Period. That's it. The second book I'll talk about is Clarice Lispector's Hour of the Star, which I was expecting to just love it. And when I read it, I was immediately put off by the first 2-3 paragraphs of the book. I was very skeptical of this thing right from the start. I realized that one of my reading pet peeves is this type of metafiction that is not properly integrated into the narrative. Like, I don't like it when narrators just talk about stuff before the story begins, because for me, like, you know, and I understand that, like, my first reaction is to call that lazy on Clarice Lispector's part. I know that that is probably uncharitable, but the thing about this is, you know, while it is poetic and it does yield quotables, it's just annoying. It's kind of an obstruction to what is being talked about, which is weird, and that's why I think you could probably say that my judgment that it's lazy, you can say that's baloney, mostly because I say that, you know, it's not properly integrated. Don't talk before the story, but the talking is the core of this book. The story is not so much the core of this book, which is a weird thing, and that's probably why I'm wrong when I call it lazy, because how am I going to call the core of the book, how am I going to judge it as if it's not part of it, you know? But either way, the reading experience was a little rocky, but I did find the story of Macabea, the typist. I love Macabea. I really enjoyed that. Problem is, it's about, like, I want to say 50% of the book is not Macabea. But this is the first bit. All the world began with a yes. One molecule said yes to another molecule, and life was born. But before prehistory, there was the prehistory of prehistory, and there was the never, and there was the yes. It was ever so. I don't know why, but I do know that the universe never began. Make no mistake, I only achieve simplicity with enormous effort. As long as I have questions and no answer, I'll keep on writing. How do you start at the beginning if things happen before they happen? If before the prehistory there was already the apocalyptic monsters? If this story doesn't exist now, it will. Thinking is an act. Feeling is a fact. Put the two together. I am the one writing what I am writing. God is the world. Truth is always an interior and inexplicable contact. Right? That is 2.5, maybe 2 1/3 of a paragraph. That's not even 4 paragraphs of stuff. I think that the way those paragraphs are constructed, there's something off about the construction of those paragraphs. But one of the things I admire about this book, and, you know, this, keep in mind that this is the type of thing that will probably crush with other people. Like, this, there's some serious meat here, and there are parts of this that I really did enjoy. I enjoy how much it talks about creative anxieties and all of that stuff, about what a compelling picture of, you know, when the book begins, largely defeated creativity, but triumphant creativity as well. I enjoy that. The problem was, every time, like, that narrator pops up and just talks, I just kind of want him to shut the hell up. But, you know, I say don't let that distract you from reading this book. You should totally read this book. This thing is interesting. And after reading this, I do have to say, for as much as this thing kind of irritated me in spots, Clarice Lispector is a hell of a writer, man. I'm really excited to read more Clarice Lispector. Like, I think if I could just find a book from her that doesn't rely on metafiction, I think that would be killer. I would love it, probably. Yeah. Super interesting author, too. But also there's an interesting thematic statement. But, you know, I mean, not everything is going to be for me. It's cool. But, yeah, what else? All right, so the two things. Well, I'll start with Palm of the Hand Stories by Yasunari Kawabata. I've finished it. I all but finished it at one point, and then as I got further and further into it, I was enjoying it so much. And I've been reading these for about a year, almost. But I've been enjoying this so much from start to finish that I don't want it to finish. And I have like 4 stories left that I refuse to read. I have Earth, the White Horse, Snow, and Gleanings from Snow Country left. And I don't want this thing to end, so I'm constantly delaying the gratification of those final 4 stories. Because honestly, some of my favorite stories that I've read are in here. It's so good. Kawabata is such a understated writer. I love how some stories here will end in anticlimax, God's bones, where someone is like, oh, you should totally bury the ashes, and the girl goes, what? I gave them to you. Why should I have any of the ashes? It's a 3-page story. It's not much of a spoiler. And a lot of these stories, I would say are unspoilable, if only because they're not about plot. If you go into these expecting plot, you're not going to get that. Every story is just some kind of veiled reflection on an idea that might be in Kawabata's mind. They're more akin to poetry. It's really interesting. We get really cute portrayals of youthful love in like stories like The Grasshopper and the Bell Cricket. We get some awesome stories like maybe my favorite here, The Silverberry Thief, which is it's such an irrelevant series of occurrences that when Kawabata draws attention to the emotion of all of this and employs the symbols that he does to it becomes like you start really realizing that this is almost a religious book in some ways, because it's all about finding fulfillment in our own everyday. It's about giving new meaning to the everyday and the tiny and the insignificant. And I found this just really a truly fulfilling read. Honestly, I loved it. I loved almost every story in here. There were like 3 stories that I was like, I thought were meh. They were non-starters for me. But keep in mind that this thing is something like, I want to say 60, 70 stories. Yeah, and Kawabata is so good at zeroing in on these really compelling either family situations or these really compelling objects and kind of fleshing out the significance of a story and of really anything through that, right? One of the more popular ones in here would be called, the Silver 50 Cent Pieces, which is basically about this insignificant paperweight that gains monumental significance after World War II, because of who got it. And the thing was so cheap, and people mock this girl for buying it. But after, it just becomes this almost like a, I don't want to say like a talisman but it becomes like almost like a really important treasured object, like an artifact from this person's past and their family's past. It's beautiful. I'll say poems. Stories like A Pet Dog's Safe Birthing are just really interesting kind of meditations on life, and I love hearing about this vet who's constantly trying to get these babies out of the dog. It's so good. And Kawabata's style, there's this thing he likes to do where everything is symbolic in the story, and that occasionally yields some hilarious passages. There's a story in here called Lavatory Buddhahood about a guy who achieves nirvana in the bathroom. I'm sorry, but it's so funny. It's really funny, man. Of course, it's ironic, but it's just hilarious. But overall, I love the understatement of this. The young lady of Suruga, amazing story. What is one? I'm forgetting the title, but it's the one about the funeral. The guy sees it out of the bathroom. Makeup would be the title. That one's really good. You might not get a strong emotional connection with some of these, but overall, they're the thing that the images are so well selected that they remain in your mind for a long time after, and all of a sudden you'll be thinking about, I'll be at work and I'll be, basically like trying to load trucks up and unload transports and all that stuff with the forklift, and all of a sudden I'll, without anything sort of running through my mind, I'll just think of, 2 girls hugging in the rain outside of a train. Or I'll think of, these 2 people who meet up in this little tree and they just hang out and hug and do homework in a tree. Or, maybe I'll think of the hat incident where, I see that story as about how the mythical is still possible in the everyday. And all it is a guy who, someone's hat falls in a river and he pushes someone in. That's the whole plot of the story. That's it. But they're poems. They're beautiful. I really enjoy them, and I'm going to be taking this to school with me because I can't go without this, for sure. I want to take this with me almost wherever I go, anywhere I live in the future. I'm going to hold on to that one, I think, for the rest of my life, because Kawabata is a favorite author of mine. And I'm sorry to just gush over Kawabata like this, but yeah, he's that good. Read him, please. I got some more books coming. I'm going to read The Old Capital, The Master of Go, and Dandelions next, I think. But when I go to school, I'm gonna try to get The Scarlet Gang of Asakusa, because I can't seem to find that for cheap where I'm living. So even from bookstores that are nearby or good bookstores that could ship, I can't seem to find it for cheap anywhere. So I'm gonna check it out at the library. But what's got me onto that, and this is Women in Translation Month, and I've already I talked about Kawabata and Armand. That's not. And I got a video on Fatland by Deben Roy coming out. But what's been getting me onto Kawabata is the Tale of Genji, because the influence that Genji has on Japanese literature is basically ubiquitous. You can really feel it in Kawabata, specifically some of those stories that I'm looking back. And with Genji in mind, there are certain stories like the J, I think, as well as, what's the title? Sorry, I forget the titles of these. The J... Up in the Tree has some elements that remind me of Genji. The Younger Sister's Clothes reminds me of Genji. Like, there's a lot of this that is just ubiquitous in Japanese literature. And this thing is a great read by itself. It's a very narrative book where Kawabata feels like he has to zero in on these tiny, tiny moments and gestures between people. Murasaki Shikibu does a similar thing, but those suggestions and those gestures are housed within this sprawling narrative. One of the things that there doesn't seem to be much of the way of structure for this, but Genji is a character who's like he's just a philandering guy. He loves throwing his genitalia around to everybody, and there's no sense that he will stop, but he seems to be like I'm sorry to quote Broad again when I talk about him, but he's at the mercy of unknown vectors. He's just built that way. And he can't seem to stop, like, no matter what he does, even though it yields a ton of sadness for him and for the women. But overall, the first chapters of this book are hilarious. Especially the second through the fourth are just like gut-bustingly funny. But the deeper I get into this book, and I'm, I think, about 350 pages. I'm at chapter 20, Asagao, but I'm at chapter 20, and the deeper I get into this book, the more strongly the note of sadness throughout this is being struck. It's really interesting. We get some amazing characters. I love the Rokujo Haven. I love Yugao. I love, I think it's, that's right, I always stutter with Japanese names. Utsusemi. I love that character. Lady Akashi is really just an awesome character. Aoi, my favorite chapter here, Heart to Heart. Oh my god, it's so good. The Lady of Falling Flowers is a good one. And just as we go on, I'm just falling deeper and deeper in love with this book. We're doing a group read on Instagram, and I think Noah, Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse, had said something along the lines of, he harps on the morality of this and the satire of it, but I think the author's trying to firmly sidestep issues of morality in this. I don't see her as grilling Genji all that hard for even some insanely terrible things that he does, but which I'm not going to go into, but yeah, it's really interesting that what's going on in this book. Amazing character stories, a ton of characters. One of the difficulties of this is that no characters are really directly named. Even Utsusemi, that character, it was considered rude to name people at the time directly. So Utsusemi basically just translate to the lady of the cicada shell, and she gets that name because of her story. So all of these characters aren't named directly. Even Genji is a rank. It is the status of somebody who was birthed by the emperor. His emperor is his father, but his emperor had intercourse with, I think, an intimate, which is a lowly, if ranked at all, it's very lowly. So Genji is not in line for the throne, but he can basically go ahead and enjoy high and low class alike, because the emperor gives him a surname, and then he has to go out and do it, go out and go into the world and stuff. So even Genji is not named. On top of that, we have so many characters that are not named that it becomes difficult to tell them apart. And I have a list of characters on Wikipedia that I've been consulting that's been really helping. But overall, there's so much personality in this, so much hilarity, sadness. There's political problems that are a result of Genji's philandering that are hilarious. But once the effect is felt, they strike such a deep chord. I really enjoy them. I really enjoy so much of this. But keep in mind that if you're looking, the morality of this book is very much different than our own. I'll say that. There's a much that could be deemed problematic about this. But if you can get over that, this is going to stick with you so much. It's a blast, honestly. Yeah. Also, some of my favorite things in here, my favorite stories. Oh, Murasaki is an amazing character as well. But some of my favorite stories in here are of the Lady of Akashi and the Novice. Murasaki's backstory is really interesting. Aoi's really interesting. Fujitsubo, the Empress, is really interesting character. But also, there are possession scenes in here, which are fascinating. There are scenes where one character will get possessed by spirits. It happened twice so far, and I love those. I talked about a book on my channel a while ago that I actually read it, and I liked it, but I found it so mid, as the kids say these days. But that would be Tales of Moonlight and Rain, and Genji has totally convinced me to check this thing out again, because some of the stories in Genji of possessions occur basically in here. It seems like the type of thing that would occur in there and in here. Like somebody gets possessed, and when they speak in a voice, they speak in the voice of the person they're being possessed by, and it's like a really haunting moment. Dreams, right? A lot of that stuff happens in there and in here. And I think upon returning to this book, it might go from 3 stars up to 4 or 5, because now I'm seeing that these books, this is in dialogue with Genji. They're both talking to each other. It's really interesting. And Akinari is totally self-conscious about the dialogue taking place. So I want to check this thing out again, because certain stories in here remind me of chapters like, I think the reed-choked house in Akinari reminds me of, chapter 14? A waste, or 15, a waste of weeds. Yeah. That chapter and this one and the story in this book are great. But man, we're getting up there in time. I'm sorry, I could just ramble on and on and on. But if you take anything away from this this video, take away number 1, Hour of the Star. You might be interested in it more than me. This could resonate with a lot of people. I just wasn't the audience for it. Armand's Breakfast at Midnight. If you're into transgressive literature, read it. Palm of the Hand Stories by Yasunari Kawabata. If you like poetry and understatement, read it. And if you like Kawabata and Japanese literature, read it. And if you take anything away from this, take away that Genji is fun. It's a blast. I'm only 350 pages into it, and I really have to say that this could be the single best thing I've read this year. I know. I'm sorry to gush so much, but I love it. Oh, also check out Tales of Moonlight and Rain by Ueda Akinari. But other than that, I think that's it. That's all I want to say. I want to do more check-in videos with Genji, because that is it's kind of the perfect storm for me this August. I'm done work on the 15th. So from that point on, I am just devoting myself to the Genji, man. But yeah, I'm binging the Genji. But anyways, that's it. That's all. Thank you for watching my meanderings in the Whateverday reads, and I hope you are having a good day. Peace and Garuvi.